Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this episode is going to be outstanding. We're here with the founder and the expert, the operator of Docked Co-Living out of St. Pete, Tampa, Greater Bay Area. And these guys, I want to read you something right off of what Docked is all about. I think you're going to really love this. It says, Docked mission is to address the affordable housing crisis by developing innovative market-based housing at half the cost, aka co-living. Founded as a crusade against municipality enforced zoning statutes that unnecessarily inflate housing costs, Docked is a regulatory hacker that maximizes density while operating within the confines of existing zoning statutes. Guys, this episode is going to be amazing. We go deep, and you're going to get so much value from this on what this company is doing and how they are pushing the limits of co-living to get amazing returns and to truly solve affordable housing with an amazing community built in. Of all the episodes I've done, this one really truly talks about the community and how this team does this almost more than any other episode that I've done. Enjoy. I'd really like to just ask a very simple question, because most of this audience is co-living and wants to know about co-living and is all in on co-living or thinks it's some wave of the future. You know, I even had a conversation one time with Robert Kiyosaki, and he literally told me this was his quote. He said, I believe, and he didn't call it co-living, I think he just called it shared housing or whatever, is the wave of the future. And I wrote that down in big, bold letters on my notepad. So I'd love to hear both of your opinion on where you see co-living, what place you see it playing in the future of America, before we get into you guys Docked and what that does and the construction aspect of it too.
Sure. I'll go first. For me, co-living, I mean, I always go back to the story of I was 26 when I graduated from USF St. Pete. I got an entrepreneurship degree. It's Bachelor's of Science, so it's a business degree, but it's in entrepreneurship. My whole background is in entrepreneurship and hospitality. And so coming out of college, you don't really get job opportunities or offers when you have an entrepreneurship degree. Everyone kind of thinks you're a flight risk, right? So, but if I were to have gotten an entry-level job in St. Pete, I would have made $37,000 to $40,000 a year entry level. And there's really no option for you to live in downtown and be like in the mix. You know, like you, as a young person coming out of school, trying to get into business and build a career, you want to be in the mix. You want to be near downtown. And to be downtown, even back then in 2016, there really wasn't an option for me unless I were to find other roommates and kind of make like Docked for myself, right? And like do that. So I ended up staying in Northern Pinellas with my parents until I got a little bit older. But when I found Docked, I fell in love with the idea of like, wow, this is what co-living could be and will be and will change the future, because for young people coming out of school, this is like ideal. It's like, I always say like, it's basically you and 5 friends went and got a house together, but it's just kind of been made for you.
Yeah. So Nick, was that how you met Mark, was becoming a member at one of these places first?
No, actually, my best friend and Mark have done real estate investments for like 10 plus years. And so there was an opportunity to work for Docked, and I took it. I was working at a real estate team. I had just left, I had a startup and I left the startup. And then I went back to hospitality, working in the restaurant, and I worked at a high-end golf resort, and everybody there was very successful. So I started asking, hey, what'd you do? And it was all business and real estate. And then I decided to get into real estate. And so I worked for a real estate team. I was the director of tech and marketing, training agents how to utilize Facebook and online marketing to get more leads and build their sphere. And then an opportunity came to work for Mark, and I ended up taking it because I knew Mark had a private equity background, and a goal of mine has always been to get into real estate private equity. And so I wanted to learn from someone who had kind of walked that path before, and then I met Mark.
That's so cool. That's a great story, man. Well, I look forward to getting into more about what Docked does, what it is, what the vision is there. That's going to be really cool to talk about for our audience. But Mark, I'd love to ask you kind of that same question, man. Like, for you, co-living being the wave of the future, what are your thoughts on that, and how do you see it playing into the next maybe 10 to 20 years in America?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can look from our own actions. So, we're all investors, both in terms of our time and money. And what I've chosen to do personally is to invest a lot of that energy, time, money into co-living. Very much we believe in it, as this demand is not going anywhere. So as an investor, the way I think about it is much like how Warren Buffett would say, if he could, he would love to invest his entire fund into single family homes in the United States. And his partner, Charlie Munger, did almost that exact thing. He was able to do at least 50% of his entire net worth into what he referred to as like apartment homes. And so, I've always gravitated, hey, it's safe, it's conservative. And in all areas of real estate investment, we like to be on the really affordable side because it's stable in every economic cycle. And just because I like to have really consistent returns, I want to be able to forecast my monthly cash flow within 1%. I knew that if we're going to specialize in an area, we don't want to be ultra luxury. We want to be in an area where we're going to have consistent demand over the long run. And we also want to be in a niche that is growing faster than what the typical market segment would be. So the asset class co-living, it's been around forever. It just hasn't been formalized. And so the first people, the pioneers to go do that are going to have outsized returns. Everybody from a tenant perspective, they all want the economics of co-living, of shared housing, but they don't want the experience of living with roommates. And so the operators that are really good at design, and that's where we kind of specialize in, is creating really unique properties where you can have the economics of shared housing, but you don't feel like you're sharing a place with a bunch of other folks that you may or may not get along with. Yeah, so we're extremely bullish. I mean, I can't imagine us getting to market saturation really in any the areas that we've looked at. And we've looked at, multiple states, multiple cities, and every municipality we look at, we find tons and tons of opportunity. The constraint here really is about bandwidth, like how quickly can someone grow? We don't think it's more of an operational challenge. We don't think that there's going to be a lack of demand. It's really a supply problem. And that supply is not even capital constrained, which I think is unique because in most areas, if you really want to scale, it's all about how do I go raise a ton of money and deploy it as fast as possible. As long as you're producing consistent outsized returns, like our view is that the world is kind of alpha scarce. Like all money is looking for how do I get an edge? How do I find a better return than average? And how do I make it as painless as possible? And that's what Doc does, is try to make it kind of a turnkey thing so that passive investors can have a higher return than a typical real estate investment. And we could do that over and over and again, including in markets today where we have, for the first time in maybe 40 years, we don't have a decline in interest rate environment. And it's made a lot of operators say, "Oh crap, I can't get deals to pencil." Well, all of a sudden we can get all your equity out within 12 months, even in today's economy, with the deals that we're seeing.
Wow. I really want to pick up on two things you just shared, Mark. One, I was watching a video the other day of Warren Buffett, and he was saying, and you were probably way smarter and more technical about some of these terms, but I'm going to do my best to share what he shared. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. Warren Buffett was basically saying that the 30-year mortgage is one of the greatest products he's ever seen. Amen. He's just like, look, it's like shorting the US dollar. If the interest rates go down, you refinance and you get the benefit. And if the interest rates go up, some guy's stuck with that. Some guy's stuck with that mortgage, then and he's going to get those rates for as long as you want to hold on to it, right? And he was just like, it's amazing. And I never really thought about how much of co-living is awesome, or what you were saying about Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett, and they wanted to be in single family homes. How much of that was because of the products and the loan products we can get on these single family homes, and what we can also get on co-living, I believe, as well, versus just co-living in general? I hope that question makes sense. That was a little bit of a ramble, but I want to kind of get your thoughts on that.
It's a great question, right? Yeah. So how much is driven by kind of the right side of the balance sheet, how you finance something, and it certainly plays an important part, right? And I mean, of course, personally, go get as many 30-year fixed rate mortgages as you possibly can. Like, go leverage to the hill. And that's exactly what I did in my career. I mean, even when I was 20 years old, like just graduated, didn't know a thing, but I had a W-2. And I was shocked that a bank would lend me money to go buy some real estate. It was like, of course I'm going to go do that. So I went out and done that. I mean, I've owned hundreds of single family homes, and it's all mostly enabled because of the extraordinary credit markets that we have. And if you have any form of inflation whatsoever, you make a fortune. and it's like the easiest money ever. Like, and so the question I think in the long run is, 30 years from now, is the US dollar going to be as strong as it is today? And I would bet everything I own that it's not going to have nearly the buying power 30 years from today. And even more so because we're in kind of like a debt spiral. I mean, we're now like 40% of our total tax dollars are going just to pay interest. It's crazy. Like I think there's very real concerns out there for the U.S. place in terms of global dominance and our ability to just pay our own bills at the fiscal level. And so I'd love to take huge bets against the US dollar over the long run. And I think a very easy way to do that is to buy cash flowing property. And we just find that cash flowing property in the co-living subsector tends to be higher. It's higher occupancy and a higher yield, more stable demand in the long run. So if we can do that, it's a perfect recipe. So we're doubling down.
Yeah, dude, well said. So well said. I'd like to go into, and Nick, maybe I'll ask you this question, and then Mark wants your thoughts on this as well. So there's this tension in real estate that Mark, you described, not real estate, I'm sorry. There's this tension in co-living that Mark, I think you described so well, that is like, everybody wants to pay $800, $900 for a room, but nobody wants to have roommates. Like, that's cool, right? And I get that because we're in this space as well. So what do you guys do to try to solve that tension or mitigate it as much as possible?
Yeah. So for us, like one of the main things that's most important is really curating community. So we're really focused on who's coming into our community. And so we're having like personal interviews. We're talking to people about what their likes are, like what do they like to do? What are they interested in? What are they trying to learn more about? Where do they want to be in their career? And we really try to like interview and do a whole interview process into like what that person is and what they're about. And then when we're setting up our houses, we have all that data. So everyone's looking for roommates who are interested in similar things to them. So some houses might be health and wellness focused. Some houses might be more like tech bros. Some might be, whatever it is, right? But it's not to say that our houses are themed as much as we're running that interview process so that we know the most information about people so we can put them in places where there's going to be less tension. Obviously it's co-living, right? So like, Bobby's not going to do his dishes, and then Joe is mad at Bobby because Bobby didn't do his dishes, and then there's this interpersonal thing, right? But that's any roommate situation. That's not, if I don't do my dishes, my wife at home, she's going to be pissed I didn't do my dishes, right? So it doesn't matter what kind of living situation you're in, there's always going to be things that you have to do to like cohabitate with someone. But we try to build community, and by building community, we're interviewing people and learning more about them so that we're putting them in the right place for them to be.
I love that. And do you also do trips? I also heard something about you guys doing trips or helping people get out of the house and do things together. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yep. So we do events every once in a while. We're trying to do more bigger trips. And really it's going to take a buy-in from the community to do the like bigger trips. But like, for instance, you have these people that are coming to Florida, right? Specifically to do outside stuff. So for me, being a Virginian who moved to Florida, and now I've been in Florida longer than I was in Virginia, I'm like, hey, this is really cool stuff. So like one of the things we're working on organizing with our community is trying to take like 20 people to Weeki Wachee, which is like a crystal clear river, spring-fed river in like just outside of Spring Hill, which is about an hour north of St. Pete, and go do like a kayaking day. Historically in the past, we've done beach cleanups, we've done yoga events, we've done, networking events with our coffee partner. So we try to do events and get everybody together, but we're going to eventually take it to that next level and start doing some bigger trips. And, you got to have buy-in from everyone to do it for it to make sense, obviously. But, at this stage, we do a lot of like in-house smaller events that are more like getting people together.
Yeah. This is such an interesting topic because I'm real good friends with the Pad Split executives, and Pad Split is really out there, the biggest name in the co-living space in America, at least, and they're trying to solve affordable housing, and they haven't really, they haven't cracked the community code yet. At least I don't think I don't know what you guys would say, but I don't think they've cracked that. I don't even think they're necessarily trying to crack like breed.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
But one of the things I think about is, I feel like when someone goes and rents an apartment, there's the gym, there's the pool, And what I found is that people use those amenities a lot less than they think they do when they first enroll. They're like, it has a gym, and they tell all their friends it has a gym, but they use it once a quarter, you know? And I feel like with co-living, in my experience, because we do something similar, we really try to bring in this aspect of community. I don't know if you guys agree with this or disagree with what I'm about to say, but I feel like it's like the amenity. It's like in our co-living spaces or in Doctor and Life Door, it's like there's community. You don't have to use it. But just the fact that you offer it, and maybe they take advantage of it once a year or not at all, it automatically makes you more valuable than anybody out there doing co-living that's not offering or even talking about community, right? I don't know if you guys agree. Do you guys agree with that? Do you disagree with that? Because what we found is like, not everybody takes advantage of it. But the fact that we do it is still like people tell their friends about the community, even though they've never taken part in one of our events. It's like weird, right? But that's like cool. That's like the gym. Yeah. What do you guys think about that? Have you seen?
Yeah, there's a great phrase that I stole from someone else, that there's co-living by necessity, and then there's co-living by choice. And I think of kind of the pad split model as, you know, people are primarily motivated by the affordability. So that's co-living by necessity. And that's a very different demographic than what we cater to, for example. We only want the people that opt in to community. And it's okay if you're introverted and you don't want to participate in the community, but at least you recognize that it's a very people-first organization, not a property-first organization. So our number one screening criteria is for maturity. You know, if there is something that happens, you know, are you going to be a normal, reasonable person to work with? And that's by far more important than, you know, ability to pay or credit score or background checks or anything like that.
How do you measure maturity?
Yeah. Oh, it's tough. I mean, it's constantly being refined. Right. And of course we get it wrong sometimes, but, you know, to date, I mean, we've had a few hundred people kind of come through our organization as what we refer to as members. And right. You know, we've had 0 evictions. We've never had to pursue anything to get somebody out of the property if they were a cancer. And I think that's kind of the leading edge of all co-living operators. It's like this challenge of, hey, you're exempt from federal fair housing laws. And does somebody have tenant rights? And if they do have tenant rights, what does that look like if it's really kind of like a roommate conflict? And so what we've done is we've gone far out of our way from day one of thinking about a new property to design it to minimize the amount of times that you have to see somebody. So there's always going to be the opportunity to like increase the velocity of serendipitous encounters if you want to. But if you don't, you can kind of keep to yourself and never run into anybody. And so we've had people stay at our places where, you know, it's 6 months and they don't even know who else lives there. and that's, you know, it's clearly the exception, not the rule, but it's possible. And it's because we'll do either ground up new construction or we'll do full gut rehabs where we can change the entire layout of something. And so that's how we ended up in construction. It's just we were too hands-on in the design process that we started telling the architects what the building code was and what was allowed and what we could get away with and what we couldn't. So we started doing, it's like, why don't we do 9 bathrooms? You know, so that every bedroom has a bath, so it's en suite. You have an entrance to your own, you know, apartment effectively. We do, you know, wet kitchens, you know, things like that. Whatever we can get away with, we're going to do to make it almost feel like a micro suite, you know, your own private space.
Right. What's a wet kitchen? I just don't even.
Yeah. Sorry. So it's like a wet bar is something that in at least Florida building code would have everything you need in a normal kitchen with the exception of a cooking surface. So you could have a sink, you could have a dishwasher, you can have that whole thing as long as you don't have a stove. And so what typically happens is that, you know, these are folks, most of the folks that we cater to are kind of, you know, 20s, 30s, and, you know, they'll find their own way, you know, whether it's a microwave or a hot plate or something like that, or they go out to common areas or they grill outside and they use it for the actual cooking. But being able to have your own refrigerator, your own sink, you know, is perceived as very close to your own apartment.
Right. So you guys are doing actually wet kitchens. If you do, you'll actually put a wet kitchen in a room.
Yeah, we can sometimes. Now, you have to be careful with the local municipality, right? Because if they see more than 1 or 2 of those, then it's like, hey, look, that, you know, they're going to say something's weird happening here. This is not a typical single family house. So we can usually get away with 1, maybe 2 in a large, you know, 3,000 square foot house. And it's really on a case by case basis. But we notice things like, you know, being able to enter from the outside directly into your room is considered an advantage, and people will pay up for that. Pet friendly rooms, things like that, will all command a premium in the market. And so we're designing our properties specifically to take advantage of that.
So cool. Tell me about the pets a little bit. That's a really interesting subject. It's kind of a hot subject right now in co-living. I mean, most co-living companies are just saying no pets, not allowed. I mean, that's mostly what we're seeing. Have you guys found a way around to actually be able to accept pets and not bother every other tenant in the place?
Yeah, it's a leading edge for us, right? So we notice when we talk to our folks that handle leasing, and we're like, hey, look, what are people talking about? They're like, well, for every lead we have that's like really good fit for our member base, we'll have another 2 that are really good fits, but we have to disqualify them because of pets. So that makes its way down to the design team, and the design team says, hey, it's time for us to start building pet friendly houses. And so that means bigger backyard. It means we have a little bit bigger rooms, and then we have specific guidelines. And so that's our next delivery here in 2024 is going to be homes that are designed specifically for pet owners.
Obviously, having like an exterior entrance would be more valuable. Maybe making a rule that the pet can't wander around in the common space unattended, like it's got to stay in your room. I've thought about this a lot because I had a podcast come out on Bigger Pockets. This was about a year and a half ago. And I was talking about co-living. And I had this guy reach out to me from Berlin, Germany. And he kind of laughed at me initially. He was like, hey, you're like talking about this co-living thing like it's a new thing. He's like, Sam, it's not new. He's like, first, humans have been living this way for eons. And people in Europe have been living this way for decades because stuff is expensive in Berlin. And then he said this phrase. He said, Sam, the room is the new apartment here. That's how we think about it. Youngsters, hipsters, 20, 30, you rent the room. You don't rent an apartment. Nobody even like thinks that way here in Berlin is what he was trying to share with me. And I was like, and I've been to Europe a couple of times, but I don't know that culture, right, as much. And I just, it feels like that's what you're trying to say, Mark, is like, man, like if I can create this thing, it's a room, but if I can make it feel like it's the new apartment, then like game over, you've won.
Yeah. Can I add something to that?
Yeah, please go for it.
I just wanted to add too that I think that's very interesting the way you said like the room is the new apartment, because I feel like even for me as a kid, like my room was always my safe place, right? Like I could have my room and my bathroom, and I could kind of, no matter what was going on in my life, that was the place that I could go to. And I noticed that in our communities, that's the same thing. Like, yes, these houses might have more bedrooms than a normal house, but that room at the end of the day is that like person's sacred space. And if it's $1,000 or less, that no matter what's going on in your life, you have that place that you can always go to and you can retreat to, and you don't have to be co-living necessarily. You can be in your room by yourself. Like Mark said, if you're super introverted and you don't want community, that room becomes your sacred space where you can go to and just have a place to be.
Yeah, Dave, I was super surprised with our very first experiment. I designed the kitchen to be huge. And in retrospect, it was way overbuilt, right? Like really tall ceilings, probably 800, 1,000 square feet, because I expected everyone to be gathering and using the kitchen kind of at the same time. And we paid really close attention to traffic patterns. And once after 6 months, we started talking to people, they're like, I've been here 6 months. I've never seen anybody else in the kitchen at the same time. And I'm like, how is that possible? There's like 8 or 10 people in the same place and they're not running into each other at like meal times. And that's just the nature of like people's lifestyles today. And so we're like, these are light bulbs for us going off. We're like, man, like it really isn't a roommate situation. There is a way to design it so that you can feel like you have your own apartment, but yet you rent is 50% off.
Yeah, exactly. So what are some of the legalities? I mean, I know you guys are pretty localized there in the St. Pete, the Tampa area, from what I understand. If that's incorrect, please correct me. But like, what are some of the things that you have to deal with, or that you find? You mentioned at the beginning of this call that, co-living is still kind of in this gray area until a lot of these laws, and I believe a lot of these laws and these rules are going to get updated. They just have to, right? I don't know if you know this or not, but the zoning laws in Atlanta right now, in some parts of Atlanta, the zoning laws read like this: unlimited number of related, up to 5 unrelated, and an unlimited number of domestic servants. That wasn't written in the 2000s, guys. Like, so a lot of these laws and rules, like, it's coming, right? It's coming as they crack down on Airbnbs. I've seen momentum through something called the City of Yes initiative in New York City for the 5 boroughs. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that, but that's an initiative to basically turn office spaces into co-living spaces. So like, there's a lot of pro co-living stuff coming out is what I'm starting to tell people, and we start to see it. That being said, what are some of the current challenges to you guys building these spaces, and are you getting around those, or how are, of course, we're not going to reference any addresses or anything, but just like what are some of the challenges there that someone else might have to face or that you guys are facing?
Parking is always an issue for us. We've seen some larger cities make a lot of movement there. We haven't seen that a lot in Florida. And so that tends to be one of our limiting factors. So we have to be really careful about that, because we always want to be good stewards for the community. And one of the things the neighbors care a lot about is, are there a bunch of cars there because it looks weird and goofy? And so we promote very much like, car-free living as much as possible, and are very deliberate about how we manage that. That is one of the areas. I mean, I think the enforcement of a lot of these provisions that we find on a municipal basis with regards to unrelated people living together, I find it very difficult to enforce in most areas. There's not a mechanism where a government official can say, show me who is on this lease, show me who lives in this property. That's not a question that like you have to answer. And so it starts rubbing up against civil rights and privacy laws. And we tend to like use that as one of our primary defenses, is that you can't tell us who lives in a particular property, because if it's a very large family, how are we defining family? Because in today's world, a lot of our families are people that we opt into, right? Yeah. And we do have
chosen family.
Yeah, exactly. A chosen family. And where is that line? Do we have to share blood or DNA? Because there's a lot of nuclear families that are not that way, especially in the gay community. You have families and they may not be, blood related, but they're certainly living together. And do we have a right to say something about that? So we tend to be a refuge for niche demographics that historically have been oppressed. And so I think it would be very politically unsavory to come out and saying these people are not allowed to live affordably. And if they were to get kicked out of an affordable place, some of them would actually become homeless. I mean, we've had, kids that graduate from foster care, and this is the only way that they could have a roof over their head. In fact, there's one example right now where literally tonight, I'm going to help him move a truck to a vacant lot so he can live in his truck, because it's legal to do that. But it's illegal for him to put a house, on over his head in the way that he can afford. And I love examples of that, because it truly is, as soon as you make housing illegal, you're going to have issues of affordability. And so all the policies that we've done, we know the effects of them, that we get what we've gotten. And so it's time to do something radically different. And so we're very much, trying to promote that, lobby anytime we can, that this is a safe, conservative way to improve a community and keep things affordable. So it's a gentrification without the cost increases in rent. It's kind of the best of both worlds if it's done properly.
Yes. And in addition to that, it's the gentrification without the increases in rent. And for the politician, it gives them an ability to say, I'm solving affordable housing without the trillions of dollars it would need to actually to actually create and subsidize and build and everything that they technically probably should be doing in the wealthiest nation in the world, right? Or one of the wealthiest nations in the world.
Oh, it's totally right. I mean, our big challenge was like, is there a way to get creative on design so we can drop market rent by 50% and not take any subsidies? And that's something that entrepreneurs can do. But the government is really the enemy here. They can't do that. They're trying to promote affordable housing, but they cannot deliver affordable housing using subsidies. We've seen how that works. It doesn't work out in the long run. You need to have market-based solutions.
Yeah, I'm getting goosebumps. This is good stuff, man. That's good stuff. That's great. Okay, so I want to transition a little bit into Doc. I know we've kind of talked around Doc, but I want to talk about Doc specifically. So just give me the overview of like what Doc is. I want to know, let's even rewind beyond that. How did Doc get started? What is it, and what does it now do? I'd love to know that. And Nick, I'd love for you to kind of give us your overview first, and then Mark to have you fill in.
Yeah, sure. So Doc right now is an in real life social club. So basically we've created a housing subscription that allows people to join a social club of other like-minded individuals where they can they can live in a house, they can become roommates, and then from there they build support systems. So what I've seen, like one of the things that I've seen from just being in Docked and working through all this stuff is that mental health is a real crisis, right? Mental health leads to people not being able to live anywhere. It leads to homelessness, all this stuff. And a lot of that, I feel like, in my personal opinion, is because of isolation. And the standard American like apartment creates isolation. Even though we're trying to create spaces that allow you to have your own space, you still have a network of other people in the house that if you should need a support system and a friend to talk to, they're there. Whereas in the apartment, you can't go knock on your neighbor's door and be like, hey man, can I just talk to you for a minute because I'm going through a hard time. In co-living, everyone, even if they haven't met each other, they haven't bumped into each other, they're all in a communication channel together so they can become friends, right? And from Docked, I've seen people start businesses together. We've seen relationships start from Docked. We've seen everything that you could imagine that is beautiful from people coming together start because of Docked. And it's because they're looking for an affordable place to live, but they're also looking for community. And when you pair those two things together, you create this nice, like, symbiotic relationship where a support system can be built for people.
Isn't home just like, I was thinking about this, like of all the things you could sell someone, anything like a product or a service, like what's more intimate than home? Like I'm selling you home. So I love, your guys' approach is maybe of everyone I've interviewed on this podcast. I mean, I think of myself and our team, what we do with CoLiving, very community minded, much more, you guys, this is next level. You guys are really, really, really thinking about it in a really, really powerful way. And I like that. It's very inspiring. I'd love to hear, Mark, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that too. And anything else you guys want to share around Docked and what it does now. And I'd also love to hear, I know there's kind of like an origin story here too. Like I'd love to hear that because I feel like you're in it now and it's cool and we're talking about all these cool ideas, but like I would love to kind of rewind a second and kind of how did we stumble across this concept? Why are you not building big apartment buildings or I don't know, something else,
Yeah. I've heard someone say that businesses are simply problem solving machines. And so we think of Docked as like, let's take two really big social problems that are facing millennials and Gen Z. And one of them, as Nick said really well, is kind of a social alienation or loneliness, which shows up, especially for young males, in suicide rates and depression and addiction issues. And it's just, you go down the list, like that demographic is not doing really well. In fact, historically they've done better. And a lot of people are pointing towards the way that we live. And that we used to be kind of a tribe. We used to have a community. Now we don't. Now it's like you're 18, you're on your own, good luck. And even in the first 18 years, many people aren't growing up with a traditional family or a traditional tribe. And so our goal was, hey, we've got affordable housing problem and we've got a huge social problem. Can we create an innovative solution that kills two birds with one stone? And that is Docked. I mean, that is exactly what we do, is we try to help you find your own tribe. And one of the benefits of doing that is that by sharing resources, we can also make sure that your budget works out. Because as you know, anybody that's studied finance or seen a compound interest chart knows that when you're young, you have to go save money and invest, right? If you want to make wealth in the long run, it makes sense to get started early. And co-living is one of those mechanisms that makes that very easy and accessible to a generation that really needs it.
So how did you come across this?
Like most things, by accident. I mean, it was did
you like start living in a co-living house? Or like, this is cool. I met this guy recently who is running a company called CoLife. And it only matches. He reminds me a lot of you guys, actually. It's a tech company that matches owner-occupied homes only with someone that wants to rent a room in that owner-occupied home. So it's like, he's like, and I was like, why not? Like, why only owner-occupied homes? He's like, because that's where the best community is. And I was like, okay, like, we had this little back and forth because I think you can do what you guys are doing. I think you can create a community. It was actually even funny. I was sitting with him at dinner in Charleston this last weekend, and I asked him, I said, so is your real goal owner-occupied homes, or is your real goal just an amazing experience with community? And he kind of went back and forth, and he was like, well, the real goal is amazing experience with the community. I'm like, if you could create that without owner-occupied homes, Wouldn't that be cool? And I feel like that's your guys' vision. So it's really cool. So that was a little bit of a tangent, but I am curious. He lived in a co-living home. He thought it was the coolest thing, and he kind of had this experience, and then that was how he got here. Was that similar for you guys?
In Florida, there's this saying that it's ideal for newlyweds and the nearly dead. So we have these two kind of really disparate groups. And like, I love this idea of co-life. I mean, because what if you could pair a senior, maybe widowed, owner occupant with a younger person, right? That would be an extraordinary match. I mean, here in our area, that would do incredibly well. And I think there'd be some really interesting social impact as a result of that. You just gave me a new idea. But that's how things happen. It's
I'll connect you with Derek. He's going to be on the podcast perfect. Next. He's awesome.
Yeah. So like the origin story for us, it started with like experimentation and trial and error. So my first intention was like, hey, look, it totally makes sense to share resources. And, I was very frugal, like in my 20s, right after school. Like I wanted to spend the least amount as possible because I studied compound interest, right? I just wanted to put everything I could into new investments. And that meant I had to get my, my burn rate down. And that meant, sharing resources with other people. And I thought the best method was going to be one that's very cooperative, right? Kind of like a co-housing or like a housing cooperative, something like that. So we played with that. We called things like, here in St. Pete, we had one called the St. Peace House. And it was, folks that would collectively, make decisions. Inspired by, I ran into a group of Quakers, and that's how they run their organization. So the Religious Society of Friends, and like they do it all by consensus. I was like, hey, that would be cool if you could create that type of community housing. What we found over years is that it's really, really hard to do that. And so we were like, well, we really like the model, but we got to get rid of this like self-governance issue. It's much better to do things professionally and have standards and guidelines. And then there's like, everybody knows what to expect in terms of everybody else's behavior. And there's kind of like a training period for us. It's not just like, hey, you just, sign some documents, put in a security deposit, and boom, here's your plays. It's like you get trained on how to be a good member of this community. And that's how we avoid, the issues that would be more common in a roommate scenario.
Yeah, that's really cool. What is the main reason or reasons why you do I think we've talked a lot about the community aspect of it, but you do this membership agreement versus leases. Could you talk a little bit about maybe, does that help you? I know for us, we do something very similar, but it's, for legalities, for some legality reasons as well. Is for you guys, is it just all community, or does it help? Are there any other reasons behind that?
I'll take that one if you want. Yeah. Okay. So I mean, we're really innovating in terms of where is someone a guest in a property, or are they a tenant? With tenant rights. In some municipalities, if you have tenant rights, it could be a very long process if something goes wrong. And for us, that's scary because we care so much about the community. If there is a cancer in the community, that spreads very quickly. And then it destroys everybody else's experience. And so we really need to make sure that if someone's disruptive, that we can solve it right away. And by starting from day one with this idea of a membership into a club, one of the benefits of that club is that you can apply to live in one of our properties, and it's not a specific property. It's this idea that you truly have to meet certain standards at all times, and if you don't, then you could be forcibly removed, and
your membership could be terminated.
Yeah, exactly. Like your access to certain things will be terminated.
I would also say that what I really like about the membership is all the offerings, right? So instead of like your standard lease where it's like you get a room, right? That's your room. With our membership, it's everything's included in that membership. So it's access to the house. It's all utilities are included, high-speed internet. We have a professional maid that comes and cleans. They can opt in to have their rooms cleaned if they want. We have high-end Colombian coffee that's provided to every single house. We do the events. I mean, there's so much included in that membership that it gives people one, more flexibility, but also two, like, everything's included in that membership. So it's more than just a lease.
Yeah. The convenience option is also a huge selling point because, if you imagine you go rent a new apartment, you're going to spend the first 3 days setting up electricity and then internet, and you've got to wait for the guy to come on and turn on the gas. And it's like you have security deposits for all of them. And you've got to spend a certain fraction of your headspace every month just taking care of silly things like utilities. And so we just wrap that all together and make it more of like a subscription. And it includes, we have like a card that people can use around town, so they get discounts at any of our partner businesses and things like that. And that's a big selling point, because like the yoga studio could get 20, 30, 40 new folks as a result of the doc referrals.
Yeah, brilliant, guys. So talk to me a little bit about what are the offerings, like and I want to, what are the ways that someone could work with Doc? Like as it stands right now, like someone maybe even in the audience, and usually I do this towards the end, but we're kind of talking about Doct, and I want to ask a few more questions. So maybe just kind of talk right now a little bit about, hey, here's what you're providing. I know we've talked about the construction a little bit. We've talked about, you manage some of these properties. If you could just share a little bit about what Doct would offer to somebody who's interested in getting into co-living, what that looks like, I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, ideally in the long run, we're a two-sided marketplace. So on one side, it's like, we're attracting and recruiting the right members to the community. On the other side, we're serving investors, and that we can provide alpha, we can provide outsized return per unit of risk, because we do things in a really niche way in markets where we have a competitive advantage. If I had to explain like what are our competitive advantages, it's going to come down to the fact that we're vertically integrated. So we can build things or rehab things at substantially lower than market cost. And we're also sharpshooters, so that we know that real estate is one of the most inefficient markets in the world, and we can always take advantage of that. Because we've been doing this for so long, there are deals that come up from time to time. So when we look at a property, we analyze it radically different than every single other person that's going to be looking at it. Most people will value it based on the building that's there. We look at it more for in terms of what we can eventually build on that land. So large lots with small single family homes work really well for us. What we've done in the last few years is to try to use only our own capital to really refine that recipe. So we've done tons and tons of experiments to get the right playbook absolutely dialed in, and to have the right team and the right operations and systems to scale. So we're at 2024 is our year where we first start becoming more public. And what we're excited about is that we've never shared the results of what we've actually done, but we're going to start doing that. And we're really excited about that because the returns look ridiculous, and people aren't going to believe it. So we're prepared to show actual bank statements on to show the results of the properties. There is a distinction though, is that we happen to be in one of the hottest markets in the entire country. And so a lot of people I know are going to be like, well, that's great that you have a 3x return on your investment in 2 years, but you could have thrown darts and done just as well. In other words, a rising tide lifts all boats. And that is totally true. We've benefited from just general market appreciation. But I'd say in the last 12 months, we haven't had really any market appreciation in our area. But we're still doing deals that look just as good as the deals we've done a few years ago. What that means, I'll give you some examples. So we love to focus on kind of the smaller niche deals because our returns are a multiple on invested capital is going to be substantially higher than if we were trying to deploy $50 million. I wish we could deploy $10 million chunks and still get these returns, but we know we can do kind of the $1 to $10 million chunks, and it works out really well. So a recent deal we did, we bought a 4,000 square foot house, needed a full gut rehab. It's situated on a double lot. Our all-in cost there was $410 for the acquisition. We spent about $200K on a full gut rehab. That's new electricity, plumbing, HVAC, roof, everything.
This is in St. Pete or Tampa area?
Yeah, in the Tampa Bay area. And then we redesigned the layout to be ideal for sharing. Then we went out 2 months ago to get an appraisal. And so it appraised over $1 million. So our all-in cost is low 600s. We get an appraisal at 1.05. We can easily go refi then. So we've now got a loan of we got $950K back from the bank. So an extra 300K of tax-free distribution that we can then go reinvest in the next property.
Yeah, that's
yeah,
great.
We've done that.
How did you get 95% LTV though?
Well, that's a niche lending relationship. So,
what are you? Really the Mark bank? You're the bank too now. Is that what you're doing?
Well,
I'm the bank.
Well, yeah. I mean, finance drives a lot of real estate. So we do have to talk about how we borrow. So first of all, it's a personally guaranteed situation, right? So that makes sense for some people. It doesn't make sense for others. I personally guaranteed it, which allows us to get a higher LTV. It's also a longer standing relationship, but it's through a nonprofit lender that has a mandate to promote affordable housing as well. So their underwriting criteria is a little bit different. And we've locked in a multi-year deal with them, knowing that we were going to scale eventually, and that it makes sense to have a fixed rate borrowing for us. So we're totally going to take full advantage of that going forward. And so that's a service that we offer to investors in the future, is that everything is turnkey. We'll handle the financing. We personally guarantee the loan. We do the acquisition, we do the rehab, we do the property management. So it's absolutely convenient for a passive investor. And we're really going to target kind of the high net worth individuals, mostly that just hear about us through word of mouth. People will see our returns.
You guys want to do all the ops, even to the point of personally guaranteeing it, and all someone else needs to bring is capital to you guys.
Yeah, and also we co-invest in every deal. Like we really believe in what we do, and so we want a lot of skin in the game. And so we require that we have a meaningful interest in every one of our deals. And I've been very hesitant. Nick and I have thought a lot about, does it make sense for us to take on investors? And if so, who is that going to be? And I've really pushed back a lot on it because I really want to make sure we knock it out of the park. We take that obligation like super seriously. And so I wanted to have, a 5, 6, 7 year track record of crushing every single deal that we do, so that we have the confidence that, hey, look, when we tell you this property is going to return X, Y, and Z, we're going to totally hit that. And that's how we as managers, as a GP, should be evaluated.
Was that loan that you got, was any of that based on the income of the property, or was it purely like more of a comp based appraisal on what it's worth as a property? Just out of curiosity.
Here's a tip for your audience. So most states will have a community CDFI, Community Development Finance Institution. And those organizations are nonprofits, and like certain financial institutions, bank, they have a requirement to spend a certain amount of capital that would be reinvested in the Community Reinvestment Act. And so CDFIs benefit from that. So their cost of capital is different than a traditional bank. They're more onerous to work with, for sure. But for weird niche asset classes like co-living, sometimes they make a lot of sense. And so the way that they underwrite deals is not so much on the cash flow. I mean, of course, they're going to look at DSCR and things like that, but it's really, they care about the appraiser. Is the appraiser going to say, hey, if I had to, could I offload this and get all my money back? And that's one of the challenges when you create like super unique properties, is that some appraisers, they're only used to the 2-bedroom, 1-bath, and they're like, what the hell is this? And so, that has been, certainly a long learning curve for us, is how do we find the right appraiser that's sophisticated enough to understand that this should be valued based on the cash flow it produces. And we tend to find that in the commercial market. So, our lender, this one that we've used in the past, they tend to not really care too much if it's a commercial appraiser, residential appraiser. They just want to make sure market value is accurate. And so, we pay more for the appraisals, but we get someone a little bit more sophisticated that will look at our rent roll instead of trying to just do comps, because you're not going to find a comp for our property because they have like 8 bathrooms.
Yeah. So you're basically ordering a commercial appraisal, paying the $2,000. And let's go with that. Yeah, we just recently got a local credit union here that basically said that same thing. They were like, hey, if you expect, and they said, hey, especially if you have history, we will underwrite this as a commercial building, pay the $2,000 for the commercial appraisal, and we will not do a comp-based appraisal based on this, which is just an appraisal. For anybody listening, it's just an appraisal based on like, well, what did the one next to it sell? And what did the one down the street, quarter mile last month sell for? Like, no, this is going to be partly based on income, which would be, that's a game changer. It's an absolute game changer. So Absolutely.
And we have done deals. We've done a few deals with partners in which we've taken outside equity capital, and we've financed using local banks. 75% LTV. So I think there's one where we bought, I think all in we're kind of 573, and the investors within 12, 18 months are getting all their equity back.
9 months.
In 9 months. Wow, shit. We're pretty good. So in 9 months, returning all the equity, they still have, full ownership of the property. And then they've got a great fixed rate. And the property's cash flows with that.
Yeah. Its gross rental income is $6,900. So it was able to pull pretty much 97% of all their capital out within 9 months.
Yeah. So even using like commercial banks and like market financing at today's terms, we still can produce, what we consider to be amazing deals. If you can get all your money out within a year and have a property that cash flows, and you benefit from those rents going up every single year, right? So most of the markets that we're operating in, they're very supply constrained. It's very difficult to build housing. There's not enough land left, especially in the areas where people want to live. And so this is a kind of a creative way to add some density, extract a higher rent roll, as and then get it appraised properly, and then that benefits the investor.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah, I want to ask really, I got 4 more things. And I know we're coming up on time. Do you guys have time? We can kind of rapid fire these last ones if you guys are good on time. Okay. So one thing that stood out to me in your membership as I was looking over all of your stuff was that you charge, and I'm assuming this is still the way it is, but Nick, maybe you could answer this. You guys charge a per night fee for overnight guests. Is that still the way it is? And maybe you could just share why you do that. I found that a little unique. I've seen other companies, have a limit on overnight guests. My company has a limit on overnight guests, but up until certain. So just tell me a little bit about how that plays out, and maybe even how you enforce that. I was like really curious. I was like, man, you got like someone sitting at the Ring camera, be like, charge them $50.
It's really community driven, right? So people kind of let you know when someone who's not supposed to be there is there, right? That's really how you enforce it. The community, they don't hold back. Let's just say that.
Yeah, we're going to share.
They don't hold back. They let you know what's going on real quick. And we don't enforce it like immediately, right? So they have like a grace period of how many days someone could stay, right? I'm never going to say like, hey, you can't have your mom stay with you or whatever, right? Like someone's going to stay, and then it's just like, hey, if someone's going to stay with you for 2 weeks, then we need to talk about some sort of enforcement on the guest policy. But other than that, we don't really have issues with that.
Yeah,
almost ever.
So it's really a disincentive versus it's really a way to disincentivize someone from having someone else live with them, basically.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
It's applying like your persuasion tech to discourage it. It's kind of like a preventative measure, right? We tell people, hey, this is a place where if you're dating somebody and somebody's going to be sleeping over all the time, it's probably not a good fit, right? So we just set that expectation up front. The more that we talk about and have legal language related to our rules and how we want that community to operate, the more likely it's going to run smoothly.
Super smart. I like the way you guys approach that. I think that's awesome. Mark, I was reading through your LinkedIn, and I was reading through that you actually started doing some things. If you could real briefly touch on this, you started building homes for foster youth. And I thought that, could you share how that, does any of that play into kind of your interest in co-living, I guess? And maybe tell us a little bit about that and as part of your story.
Yeah, here's the quick version. So a friend and I, we worked together at this nonprofit that mentored and worked with kids that were court involved, and the vast majority of those were in the foster care system. There's this huge problem when somebody turns 18. There's no way that they're mature enough to live on their own, and they certainly in a place like Tampa Bay, they can't afford to live anywhere. So I would have kids calling me, and this happens even this past week. It's happened where it's like, hey, you remember me? I'm sleeping on a park bench. I need some help. And I get texts like that all the time. Hey, I'm homeless. I need some. I'm like, we've got a housing problem. We need to solve this, right? There has to be a way where someone can afford to live if they've got a full-time job or if they're in school full-time. So, I started looking into like, why is housing so affordable? I mean, so unaffordable. And it's like, my conclusion was, and I think this is anyone that actually looks at, what drives the cost of housing, maybe 30, 40% is attributed to regulation. And so it's like, okay, density is obviously the answer. We need to create more density in order to drop the cost of housing. And the cities that do that well have better, results. I think Minneapolis is a really great example. I mean, they've just opened the doors to development, and like rents have been absolutely stable for the last 3-4 years, where the rest of the country is going through the roof. And there's lessons, any economist needs to look at these stuff and tell the urban planning departments, hey, look, if we really want to drop the cost of housing, we need to reform some of the policies. And so my goal was, can I get a 18 or 19-year-old to become a homeowner, given their limitations on what they can earn with their skill set and experience? And we did that. And we did that by building from scratch and then making sure that they could have their buddies live with them too. Right. So we built really small places. These are folks that are used to sharing. And we're like, holy cow, like all of a sudden this guy that we knew that used to be a bit of a troublemaker, he's a homeowner, right? At 19. And most people, they're 35 before they can have that type of stability. And if you know anything about foster care, you know how important it is to have like a stable home environment. It's a thing they've never had their entire life. And so that was the kind of the core motivation, is like, how can we radically change these kids' lives? And I think it starts with having a safe, comfortable place where it's like, this is mine and nobody can take it from me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well said, man. It's beautiful. I wanted to read, maybe I'll kind of end with this. I wanted to read, we've touched on this a little bit, but I wanted to read it because it really kind of impacted me when I was looking at your LinkedIn, and I'd love both of your opinion on this. So you said Docked Living, started in January 2018. Docked's mission is to address the affordable housing crisis by developing innovative market-based housing at half the cost. And this is the part I really wanted to hone in on. Founded as a crusade. That word just hit me hard. I think it's good. It's a powerful word. Against municipality enforced zoning statutes that unnecessarily inflate housing costs. Docked is a regulatory hacker that maximizes density while operating within the confines of existing zoning statutes. First of all, I don't know who wrote that very well. I mean, it's a nice,
great, man. Like when you're reading, I'm like, hell yeah, dude, let's go.
Yeah. I feel like I'm at an MLK like rally or something. I'm like, let's go. It's good. And I just really wanted to give you guys just say something about that. Well, what does that really mean to you?
I'll tell you,
and express it to someone. It says it really well, but anything you want to say about it?
Yeah, for me personally. Okay, so there's many ways that you can approach a business, right? And for me, at my stage in life, I need to have purpose and meaning in everything I do. Otherwise, I just get bored as hell, and I'm like, I can't spend my time doing this. And so I'm all about cause, right? And I love being the maverick. I love being on the side of righteousness, on the people that are disadvantaged in some way, in order to create some sort of societal change or some sort of societal impact. So that fires me up. I love when the building department gives me a hard time. I'm like, yes, let's go, right? I've studied the building code as well as they have, and I'm ready to have that fight, on behalf of the people that will benefit from the development that we do. So that's what gets me motivated, to continue investing in and exploring how to improve our business model. I view it very much as a crusade. What do you think, Nick?
I would say for me personally, and there's something that Mark said earlier about businesses being problem solvers, right? And for me personally, I view myself as a creative problem solver. And so the reason that I got so involved in this is because I see a real big problem, which is affordable housing and people not having access to it. And I found that this is the creative solution to it. So me being here, leading the team with Mark and Santiago, one of our other partners, this is our crusade. This is our mission. This is what I'm going to do every day until the day I die, whether it's Docked or it's another form of affordable housing. I feel very lucky in that I was blessed with a support system at home with two parents that cared about me very much, and they made sure that I always had a roof over my head. So that's become a mission for me to put roofs over other people's heads.
Well, gentlemen, so well said. It has been an honor to interview you during this time. Thank you so much for your time. This has been one of my most fun interviews. And the truth is, I could do a round two to this. There's more questions I want to ask you. I know, Mark, we talked about connecting on the Untethered Soul and Michael Singer, which is something we have in common. But for time's sake, I think I'm going to just move on. And I know that our audience is going to get a tremendous amount of value from this. How do people reach out if they want to get involved in Dock or want to learn more? What's the best way?
Yeah, they can go to our website, which is dockedliving.com. They can email me at nick@dockedliving.com. They can reach out to on the info page. They can reach out to our social media page. You can find us pretty much anywhere online, and feel free to reach out. And we have a phone number. If you text or call it, the girls will answer, and they'll tell me that someone reached out.
Yeah. And I'm on Twitter at Hunter Mark J. And my website's markjhunter.com. And I love sharing industry best practices. So I very much view co-living as kind of a movement globally. And yeah, we never view anybody as a competitor. Everybody is a collaborator, especially since we tend to be in very geographically dispersed areas. So if there's anybody in the industry that wants to connect, we love being able to share notes on what's worked for us, what hasn't, and how we're approaching certain challenges.
Oh, I would also say, too, that Mark made another interesting point earlier about outside capital. We've only taken on 2 investors other than in-house capital. And if anybody wanted to do a dock property with us, they're more than welcome to call. We're fully vertically integrated, ready to grow.
That's awesome. Well, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. We'll link all those links in the description of the podcast episode. And thank you so much for being on.
Thanks, Sam.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam.
Well, I truly hope that episode did not disappoint. I had goosebumps several times during the episode. I took 2 full pages of notes. One of my favorite things I get to do is interview amazing, smart, capable people in this niche. And I'm sure I'm going to find a way to work with these docked guys. That being said, please share this episode, because when you share this, 2 things happen. Number 1, you help someone get better returns on real estate and recognize that they can get better returns on real estate. And number 2, you become part of the solution that we talked about so much in this episode to solve affordable housing and to solve this homelessness problem in America. So let's all be a part of that solution. Click the share button. That helps us a lot and grows our audience as well. Love you guys. Thank you so much for your attention. We'll see you guys on the next episode.